Well, I cannot really show you erosion as I don't have a river flowing through the middle of the classroom here. But I can show you the result of erosion. And by the way, whether it's actually done by river and called by erosion or done by wind and called by deflation, the results are the same. The rocks will be rounded and are getting smaller and smaller. If you find rocks with straight edges like this one and sharp corners, it's usually man-made. It's the result of blasting and is called crushed rock. And now sometimes these rocks can break in half too, but in that case the rocks will have round corners on all sides except along the surface where they just broke fresh. So you start with big rocks, and usually these bigger rocks are typically found on the upper course of a river, where it's relatively narrow, flowing relatively fast through rapids or over rapids and small waterfalls. That's where you find the biggest rocks most often. As you go downstream with the river, you go to the middle course of the river, rocks deposited on the bottom and along the shores of the river are getting smaller and smaller. When you reach the lowest course of the river, and either a delta or an estuary, the rocks become really small. Here is a pencil for scale, so you have an idea of the sizes of the river, the sizes of the rocks that are eroded by the river. There we get smaller and smaller rocks, and you can see through it that the colors of the rocks are the same. There's always almost black ones. There is almost always white ones, and these rosy ones in between. And the last stage is that the rocks wear away so much so that they become sand. And here is the final smallest particle that can be made by rivers or wind: coarse sand. Anything finer than this, it needs life. It needs roots and plants and animals to make the particles finer than this. It doesn't happen by physical erosion. Now, rivers or wind can do the same. You can find sand in deltas or estuaries or rivers just as well as you can find sand in the middle of the Sahara Desert. In the middle of the desert, the work is done by wind and the tumbling action of rocks being blown away or blown around, plus the cold and heat, the expansion of the rock daytime and nighttime. If you find big rocks in your soil and in your garden, and you live in an area that would be referred to as the upper run of the river, or the lowest run of the river, and you find huge rocks in your garden or in your area, it's probably wasn't left there by the river. It was deposited there by glaciers. When the last glaciers retreated, that's when those rocks were left there. Those are called moraine. That is just the rock on the underside, on the bottom of any ice flow.